It's just about time, so let's go ahead and get started. Sean, would you mind closing the doors? Other people are still welcome to come in, but it'll cut down on discussions at the front desk coming into the presentation. Forewarning for everybody, welcome, welcome, welcome. We have cupcakes against the wall there. There's chocolate, vanilla, and maybe one pumpkin left. May or may not actually be pumpkin. Pumpkin spice usually doesn't have any pumpkin in it. It's usually just the cinnamon and the nutmeg and the sugar. And more sugar. So it seldom actually has true pumpkin in it. So, forewarning for everyone, we are indeed recording this. So if you are in some sort of witness protection program, let us know so that we do not put the recording online. But otherwise, the intent is to edit it down and put it as something that other people can use as well. Thank you all for coming. I know this is a really busy time of year. We have a couple of visitors to LPI today. Ryan, would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah, my name is Ryan Yakovic. I am a new hire Raman imaging spectroscopist. And so I'm glad to be here.
And in the back?
My name is Amber. I work for the National Materials Research and Exploration Science Group, and I've been working here this summer.
Awesome. We're glad to have you both with us today. We're not going to take a lot of time going around the room, but please do introduce yourselves afterwards. And Andy, we've got a few people who have joined us online. Could you care to introduce them and any comments that they put in the chat box for us?
Paul Abel from JSC. Eric Christensen. I asked for Eric because I'm not sure I'll know Eric. See if I know Eric.
The name is familiar, yeah. So I think Eric is one of the folks who has attended some of our other sessions. So thank you all for joining us. We appreciate it. And we're going to make this interactive throughout the whole seminar. So this topic today is on measuring your impact. And so let's get started. First question. So imagine you're giving a presentation, public presentation, a presentation to a group of students, of families, or you're conducting an activity at a station here at LPI, at an event. How do you know whether your actions have made an impact? So the first thing you need to start with is what your goals are. What sort of impacts do you want to achieve? What sort of goals might you have? Ideas. I yield the floor.
All right, I'll start. If I'm giving a talk, I like to think that they're going to walk out of that talk having grasped some new concept or idea that they didn't know before. I want to light people up.
So you want them to come away with a particular concept, something new.
Yeah. And cool.
Great idea, great idea. Other ideas, and people are welcome to join us on the chat as well. Add things to the chat.
I'd like to know they're not sitting on their laptop ignoring me.
You want to know if you've got their attention. You want to know that you are actively engaging them.
Testing them.
And he is modeling this by having his laptop there. But he is clearly paying attention because he responded to the question.
I mean, there is some truth to that, of course. It's like you want your audience to, or your targets, and not be often thinking about some other things. And we often have that trouble at LPSC and other conferences.
So you want to know that they are actively engaged, that they are in some way invested in this.
Right.
Any others?
I'd like them to share some of my enthusiasm, to come away thinking, that was neat.
So you want to affect them, to have an emotional impact that indicates interest or yes.
Doesn't the goal the goal has to be modified for the audience, of course.
It does,
I assume you're going to talk about that.
Absolutely. We're not going to spend a huge amount of time on the goals because we did another seminar on goals, but just to reiterate that a little bit, you might want to affect their interest in science, in your science, in science careers, in STEM. You might want to impact their understanding of your research or of the solar system. We're all planetary. You might want to increase their awareness of what's going on. There's a lot of people out there who think NASA's just astronauts in the space station, and just they might have heard of the rovers, but everything else they didn't know we were there. So something about what science is, how science is done, or an interest in it. So these are some potential goals, but it will depend on your audience, absolutely. And it will depend not just on your audience, but what you're doing. If they are coming through and you're at a table, you're doing hands-on activities with them at a table like at Rice, and you have them for a couple of minutes, you cannot have grandiose ideas of an impact in 5 minutes. On the other hand, if you have them for an hour and they are stationary, they are in the lecture hall or in the classroom, you might have bigger ideas about the impact, or if you've got them for a whole week. So you have to modify it based on the time. You also should consider the fun factor. It's not going to be a whole lot of fun if you give them a test. There's sort of a, if we're engaging them and want them to come away with a positive feeling, you don't want them to feel like they've been tested. Andy.
Paul says how it impacts them in their lives or their children's lives or even their grandchildren's.
Absolutely. So you want to impact potentially not just the person that's there in front of you. Often at public events, often when we are doing some sort of engagement event, it isn't just an individual, it's usually a family. And for some of them, some of their goals might not be, I'm here to learn about things myself. It might be, I want you to help me inspire or encourage or teach the grandkids that I brought along with me.
I think Paul may also be coming from a planetary protection standpoint.
So many of the things that you do, many of the things that you have the ability to impact people on are related to these bigger ideas of the future of our planet. So, which is pretty important. So, okay. Numbers. If you're doing something for 5 people, you might be able to have certain goals. If you're doing something for 150 people, your goals are going to be modified based on that. If you're doing something for 5-year-olds, it's going to be different than 18-year-olds or 50-year-olds. So all of these things are, you need to consider whether your goals are appropriate for the time, for the age, for the group, for the audience. And if you have questions about that, we've got some information about goals on this scientist engagement website, but we can also help you or ask members of the audience in advance.
So Christine, you would normally then set your goals. Maybe you've accepted a speaking engagement or you've agreed to bring on interns or something like that. You set your goals right up front before you start designing your poster or whatever it is.
You should take their goals and your goals into consideration as you design, absolutely, into your design of what you are planning in terms of the type of presentation or the type of interaction. Yes, it needs to be part of your planning as you are preparing to do whatever it is you are doing. If you are not given any time, if on the other hand, hi, come on in. If you, and there's cupcakes over there in the corner. If you are instead being asked by me, could you please give a presentation in an hour? You may say, what's it on? And I may tell you the topic. And, but it is perfectly right for you to say no, or it's also perfectly all right for you to say, okay, but why? What's the point? What are the goals that you expect? Who is the audience? What is their level? Give me a little bit of feedback. And frequently, for many of our events, our public engagements, our goals are some of the ones that we just indicated earlier. Our goals are to increase their interest, to maybe provide them with a little bit of understanding of the solar system, but we predominantly want to give them access to you, because frequently our goal is that audience is going to be affected by the fact that they had a conversation and an experience with a scientist. For many members of the general public, just getting to meet you, to talk to you, you're a role model, you can talk a little bit about what you do, but we want them to know who you are. So those goals are an important part. Before you can measure your impact, you have to first of all think about your audience and your goals. And then you can start to design how you want to measure that impact. So, what are some ways to determine whether your activity, let's say it's a talk for an hour to an audience in our lecture hall, a group of family members. What are some ways to determine whether that activity met your goals? Say your goal was you really wanted to let them know something about Europa or Mars or meteorites or the moon. You wanted to let them know something about it. I'm going to ask you now to do something called a think, pair, share. I'd like you to turn to one or two people next to you, and I'm going to give you 1 minute to chat with them about your thoughts on this question. And for those of you online, you're welcome to type in chats now too. 1 minute.
I think we're trusting our cupcakes.
Amber. Sure.
I like this conversation.
Hi, so what are some ways to determine where your activity goes? Okay, so if you're in a lecture, even how would you know that whatever you're talking about is related to students?
Well, people that I don't
No, I think what I want is to have but kind of break it in what you think this is
No, but I try to leave time. I try to leave 15 minutes. Oh, it tells me immediately.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
That's the only tool I find.
Did anyone hear or express any ideas you'd like to share overall? Top level ideas.
Yeah, they put too much frosting on cupcakes.
Okay.
But more seriously, no, we were just talking about it. I always gauge the audience's reaction by the questions.
By the questions.
And I always try to leave 15 minutes for questions. I'm not always successful, but I can always tell. It's like if they're asking questions that are meaningful and I can answer, and we're directly related to the topic as opposed to, oh, why is Pluto still a planet? It's like, okay. I can immediately gauge the response by the level of the questions and the not the continuity, the number of questions. If they keep hammering me with questions, that's a good one.
So the level of questions, the content of the questions, the number of the questions.
And the number of questions. So they keep coming after me with
Indicates,
questions. It's like, wow, they were really into this. They want to know more.
So that could indicate the level of engagement and involvement. Absolutely. That's great. Other ideas?
Come
Come on.
Ask people honestly, like, I mean, literally, like, ask your friends and people that you don't know, but you at least know who they are. And you ask them to honestly respond to the question, did you get what I said? And usually I try to do that with the youngest in the audience because they are usually on it. I mean,
They haven't learned
you know what I mean?
So asking members of the audience, in particular, some of the younger members, those who might struggle with understanding, whether they understood what their thoughts were. So getting direct feedback and asking specifically for it, particularly from people who perhaps are going to be more honest. There'd be people that aren't going to try to please you by saying, yes, that was awesome, thank you.
Just behind you, we've got a little issue on your screen. What's going on there? Remind me tomorrow?
Interesting. Sorry about that.
All right.
Okay. Andy, I think Paul had some comments too. Can you?
So what Paul said was similar to what everybody else has said. Audience reactions in general, follow-up type questions. Or evidence that maybe they've investigated the topic further
Okay.
on their own.
So any evidence, awesome. Evidence that they've gone and done something further because you encouraged them that much. You got them so interested. So any
But how do you
ability.
find out that they did that?
That's a great question. How do we find out about that?
But one thing that I thought of was that's related is when people come to like a Cosmic Visions lecture here, and then they sign up for the LPIB or they sign up for one of our newsletters. So, you know, they're excited enough about Planetary in general, or they didn't know we were here or something like that. So there's like an action there that you can sort of monitor.
So if they've come to one event and they've signed up to attend more, get more information, or they keep coming back because that indicates a level of interest, or how do you know if sometimes for an event we might do a survey afterwards that they can do online that can indicate what else they're doing potentially. Follow-up survey, depending on the level. All of these have to be.
Have we done that?
We do sometimes do follow-up surveys. It depends on the type of event.
Well, I'm sorry, but we do it for every conference we run. Not just LPSC, every single workshop or conference we run, we send out a survey afterwards. And
I was thinking of Cosmic Visions, though.
For Cosmic Exploration, we do surveys right after the event. We haven't done a later post-event survey, but for some things we have. It kind of depends on, you have to, Sherelle, can you kick in with what you told me earlier? You were talking about scaling it appropriately.
Yes. Okay. So I was thinking, I was sharing with Christine earlier that when we narrow down when we're thinking about a workshop and assembling our goals, we have to narrow down the scope to measure only what's critical so we know what to collect, because then you get in the situation where you're looking and observing and everything, but you know, just go into it just trying to observe or measure 2 or 3 things so you won't get overwhelmed with so many.
And you don't want to overwhelm your audience by asking for too much data, and you have to scale it appropriately. What is the right amount of data to collect for a 1-hour event versus a whole day event? So there's, anyway. But yes, you can do a post survey, and for some things we do. And we can, for Cosmic Exploration, we can send out a survey to everyone who's attended all of them, asking them some bigger questions. That's something we could do. For those who have signed up for the mailing list, basically. So.
Paul's mentioned, I guess he's had people actually email him or call him after the fact.
Following up.
And he said, for example, I saw this presentation online and found more about it, and then came to this one to learn more.
So again, follow up and sometimes it's anecdotal, but anecdotal is great. And sometimes it's more overarching data that you've specifically attempted to collect. Those are all great ideas. Let's go ahead. I'm going to give you a tiny bit of information about assessments, and then we're going to go into more details about different styles and types that can be done that are more engaging, more fun. So assessments are used to determine whether your goals are being met. Those goals can be, did they learn something? Did they learn what you want them to come away with? Did you affect their feelings, their attitude? Are they more interested in science? Are they less interested in science? What impact did you have there? Did you improve certain skills? Did the activity that you did, and this is true for some of our educational ones, we want to know, did it increase their communication skills? Things like that. There's a couple types of assessment, and the 2 that I want to focus on today, there's this type called formative, and a lot of times the formative ones can be useful not just as at the very end of the day, what impact did you have, but it provides you feedback during, as opposed to summative, what was your final impact. So can you think of some ways that you might get formative impact during a talk?
Body language. You mentioned it earlier, body language, and how they was responding to what you're asking.
So the responses to questions, the types of questions tell you. And if somebody asks you a question way out in left field, then that gives you some information about where they're coming from. Sometimes at the beginning of a lecture, if we're giving a presentation to science novices who are very interested but very unfamiliar with planetary science, and the very first question is about black holes, we have to bring them around to what's in the solar system and what's not in the solar system as a starting point. Ed.
So something I like to do during my talks for students is if I want them to take away knowing a certain process, I'll like break it down to steps, and then I'll show a summary slide. And before I get to it, like I might show a graph and be like, so what do you think this means? I'll try to get their reaction to it and make sure that they did understand and follow me, and they are right in their interpretation. And then I'll be like, hey, and you were all right.
So you're checking for understanding before you spell out the details.
Yeah.
So yes, absolutely. That's pretty much part of what formative assessment is. It's not appropriate in every circumstance. You're not going to do formative assessment during an LPSC talk. No. And 90% of what I'm going to share with you is not appropriate for an LPSC talk. Maybe 95%. But there are other things that you might be doing that are formative that you're not even aware of. Are you looking to see if people are looking at you? What are their expressions telling you? Are they, do they look attentive? Do they look asleep? What are this going on?
I'll notice the glazed over eyes.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay. I think I might be losing them.
That's just when we have lunch together.
I thought that was the curry.
So yes, the expressions, and whether, I highly recommend, if you are trying to keep your audiences actively engaged, you do not do it right after lunch or right after a visit to the bar. Let's go ahead and, all right. So I'm going to give you, often we survey our audiences. We might survey them visually. You might do a show of hands. You might do a paper test or an online survey. You might do a real test. You can ask them for feedback via chats. So we're going to test one version out right now. What are your personal preferences among these 5 choices? I want you to show me using fingers. Use polite fingers, please. I have no idea is a fist. So I'm going to give you about 10 seconds, and I'm going to ask you to vote with your fingers. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6.
What are we voting on?
You're voting. Which of your preferences?
For giving us time.
Which of these are your
Sorry,
preferences? Is your preference, if you had to survey an audience, would your preference be to use surveys, paper, online surveys? Sorry about the noise for those of you online. There's it never fails.
They always mow.
They always mow when we're doing a seminar. Come on in. So would you prefer a paper online survey? Would you prefer a test? Would you prefer to get feedback during the presentation by chatting and questions? Would you prefer a combination of these? None of the above. You have something completely different that you do. What would you do if you had to pick one of these 5 answers? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Please vote. Okay. And we have a variety of choices, but the majority of you either choose 3 or 4. But what I just had you do was one way of getting your feedback. So that's one mechanism of getting feedback. And people online choose 3. 3 was definitely very popular because, again, you're not going to give a test. If you go to visit a classroom, you've been invited to come and speak, and you give them a test afterwards, that's going to be a real downer. And if the teacher wants some questions because the teacher's going to test the kids, see if you can encourage them to have that test later, or you could ask us or some of the other education specialists at Johnson Space Center to help you come up with some questions that are less right or wrong and more about giving the teacher feedback in terms of their thoughts. So But yeah, there's lots of ways to collect data. Surveys give you more numerical data that you can go back and assess. It gives you more quantitative data. It can be pretty useful. But those quick chats and feedback give you qualitative data that could be very useful for your formative assessments. How's it going? What else do you need to do? Okay.
Professional growth. And professional growth.
And say that one more time.
Professional growth.
Professional growth. Awesome. So I'm going to give you a different type of think, pair, share now. The last one that we did earlier, you just chatted with somebody next to you. This one is intended to inspire greater discussion, and you can tell how involved people are by the level of discussion, but it only works if you ask a really good question. Sometimes questions aren't that good. So I'm going to give you one here. The question is, which of these 5 things is the best way to check for a 14-year-old student's understanding about Mars exploration if you're giving a classroom presentation? So your choices are to ask the students if they understand, to periodically poll them to do a thumbs up and thumbs down during it, to give them a test after the talk, have them describe what the spacecraft are doing, or none of those, something completely different. I'm going to give you a few seconds to think, and then I'm going to ask you to vote. We're going to be doing something much more engaging in about 10 minutes.
Okay, so.
Okay, please go ahead and show me using polite fingers your vote. On the count of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, and we're kind of all over the place. I want you to find somebody on the other side of the table, because we're kind of, this side is similar and this side is similar. Find somebody on the other side of the table, convince them that you are right, by golly, and they are wrong. Ditto for those of you online. Convince each other that you are right and they are wrong. Andy's going to join in the conversation too on the polling.
Did you say 5?
Okay? So talk to somebody.
Have them put together a mission to Mars and see how they would put it together. That's how I would like to do it.
The reason I would do it is just because like that means you're checking it in the like asking them to explain, it kind of puts them on the spot a little bit.
I don't like the way it's
I don't know. They're both good. So
I'm going to.
They like having items they want
I don't know. Yeah, that's true too. That's true too.
It really depends on what those questions
When you're dealing with 14-year-olds, there's like both of the embarrassed. You want to expect them whether they're going to be embarrassed
or you're only going to be extrovert,
whether they respond or respond like in the moment, like as a crowd. Yeah, it's kind of a toss.
I usually add the it's kind of hands it if you get it, if you don't, hands up.
Asking if they understand, they're just going to say,
wait, there's something.
Wi-Fi's going to work if you.
So there's this poster there.
Like right answers get
All right. Proper technique at this point is to take another vote to see if people's minds have changed or not. On the count of 3, go ahead and vote again. 3, 2, 1. And we're still all over the place, but that's okay. So this question was an opinion question. And the intent for this is to see what the level of discussion is. And if people have nothing to discuss, then I haven't been doing a very good job of engaging you, or I asked a really bad question. Could be either, really.
That's one answer.
But this can also be used not just to check for level of engagement and interest. this can also be used to check for understanding. So I've got another question that I put together for teachers at the end of a workshop about tides. Andy, does anybody online have anything that we should be sharing out?
Well, Paul went through and explained why so he chose 4 and explained why he would not do 1, 2, or 3.
Okay, awesome. Your opinions are perfectly valid for all of this. And I think for one, asking students if they understand, sometimes that works, sometimes it, have you seen, there's been a lot of movies where the teachers ask something and everybody goes, mm-hmm. And did they understand it? No, but they just nodded because that was the polite thing to do. That they didn't understand. So, or sometimes we think we understand and we don't. So the question then becomes, how important is it that they truly understand what you're saying? Is that part of your goal? And we always want them to understand a little bit, at least. But let's do a different one. Well, actually, I'm going to take a really quick vote as to whether or not you guys want to do this one, because there was a request earlier that I not make you all think too hard. Okay? So this question is one that I've given to teachers, and it's meant to be challenging, because if it's too easy and everybody gets it right, there's no discussion. And the point is the discussion. That's the point. So if there is no discussion because everybody knows the right answer, then it's useless. So this question is after a whole lesson on tides and spring tide and neap tides and their connection to moon phases. And the question A, B, C, or D is which of those moon phases is most likely to have the lowest tides? With A being 1, 1, 2, 3, or 4, and 5 can be I have no idea. Or actually 0 is I have no idea. 5 is none of the above. Okay? So my first question to you, do you want to do this or should we just keep going? If you want to do this, thumbs up. If you really don't want to do it, thumbs down. If you don't have an opinion, thumb sideways. Should we do it, not do it, or thumb sideways? We've got some thumbs up and we have some sideways, and nobody's like, no, no, no. So we're going to do it? Okay. First show of hands. Again, A is 1, B is 2, C is 3, D is 4, 5 is none of the above, and a fist is I don't really know yet. I haven't had time to process this. Which of these is the right answer? I want you to turn to the person next to you, convince them that you're right, explain your reasoning. Even if you have the same answer, you might both be wrong.
I don't know. Are you convinced? You think I know? Yes.
We honestly don't know.
I think it's B because at A, you've got
I haven't considered this problem
moon
since
and the gravitational
1982.
so it's going to be the highest heights in that direction, whereas B, they're at
3?
they're at a right angle to each other, so they're going to set up.
You're right. The water level.
It's not like
That would
you're
be
in
high.
What, are you doing math?
Actually, might be C.
I'll do whatever you say, because you actually got quad close.
You actually did.
Thank you.
We'll see.
Legend I could help.
No, that's where my brain was
Obvious other beers.
I'm like, wow, I should know this.
What is this? Where's this question leading?
Yeah, I know that.
And again, this is meant to be difficult. Let's go ahead and let's pause and let's do another vote on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
I still don't know.
We've got several who still don't know and several who have an answer. You know what? I see a variety of answers.
None of the above.
I'd like you to talk to somebody new this time. I'm going to give you one more chance to try to figure this out. Talk to somebody new.
Oh,
I'm looking at it. Okay, Jennifer.
We're not looking up the answer.
I know spring tide
Yeah,
is
it's
usually
been a-
the full moon, so they go right.
There we go. That's all I need.
Well, if you
If they're
turn
not
it
doing
to
right,
a
the
third quarter,
gravitation.
it's not option, so it has to be because we're trying to learn the low is
Yeah.
Andy, if they're chatting as well, you're welcome to
I
chime
said
in.
me as well was a different perspective.
Yeah,
Was
you
that
probably have
it's
more
actually
questions than mine.
that's no, I like yours a lot.
It might
Because
be
that's
Steve.
anecdotal in
Because
a way
then
that
you'd
makes
have a
sense.
bit more-
All I was thinking was, well,
Just
A,
process it
the
with me.
something that's
Yeah.
on the same course vector in the same way versus
So
this
there's gonna
two
be a
and then
component.
these general.
Exactly.
Both directions.
Exactly. My thoughts exactly.
Wait, have you?
We have like.
Oh, okay. So can we do that again?
Oh,
that's so sweet.
I need
I'm gonna remember that.
If you ever have to give a high five to someone you don't
That looks so awkward.
that's why it's called an awkward high five. Okay, Mimi, please.
Okay, so, is there, no, that's intentional. Is there a question about the question? Is there a question about the question?
Number 5.
Yeah, the question's ambiguous. When you say lowest tide, I took that first off to mean the lowest, smallest difference between high tide and low tide. Other people took that to be the lowest absolute low tide.
So the
And that gives you a
intent here
completely different answer.
is
Confuse
the
the audience.
lowest of the tides, period.
Okay.
So, given that, let's go one last time on the count of 3. One last time on the count of 3.
But doesn't it matter where you are on the surface?
No, it doesn't, because it's, yeah, okay.
I don't know.
But you're right, it does matter which part of the earth you're on, absolutely. But which time of month? I should specify which time of month. So A is particularly a particular phase, right? A
Mm-hmm.
is full.
Yep.
B is
First quarter. Mm-hmm.
No, third quarter.
No, first quarter.
The moon.
That's first quarter. That's first quarter.
Counterclockwise. The moon orbits.
That's first quarter.
So
The lights to the right.
Know that everything
Or
else
so
is
wise.
clockwise or something.
okay.
That's your.
Of these phases, and of course, it all depends on whether you're from the northern or southern hemisphere. But so regardless of that, we've got different phases. So for these different times of a month, of a lunar month, which time of the month is likely to have the lowest of the low tides? Let's go ahead and vote now. Polite fingers, 1, 2, 3. And some of you have now changed to 1, and many of you still say 2. The lowest of the low tides is indeed during full moon and new moon, so the answer is A. It has the highest high tides and the lowest low tides. It has both within a 24-hour period.
I was really worried what all of us were saying too.
Yeah, I thought the question was the lowest magnitude.
Yeah, same.
Yes, the lowest magnitude of height, the lowest high tide versus the lowest low tide, or versus the lowest.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
the point of the question again wasn't whether you got it right or wrong. Did you have a good discussion? And in the process of that discussion, could I tell whether you had learned whatever it was I wanted you to know?
What?
And clearly, this is not a good test question. This is not a good test question. It is intentionally slightly ambiguous because you don't want them to immediately have all the right answers. You want to see about the discussion because this process makes you think, but it also can tell me, if I just gave you a lesson on tides, what the level of understanding you have is now.
It requires another cupcake.
It might just require another cupcake. Okay, let's do a couple of other things. Okay, so we're gonna do one here that's a little bit more fun. We're gonna do a snowball. Cheryl, can you help me hand out
Yes.
those? We're gonna do this one.
It's a dance thing that we do as a mixer. Well, Snowball and you run
Okay.
and scramble to find
Now,
your partner.
snowballs here are not as good for summative. They're better for formative. If you want to know what your audience thinks, if you have a question that you want them to be able to answer anonymously. Let's just say it's a sensitive question and you want to get their opinion on it. Let's say it's a question that they're going to be really embarrassed that they don't know the answer to. Let's say, you know, whatever it is, a snowball is a way, a fun way that you can have them give feedback without, within being a safe zone. And so what I'm going to ask you to do now, and for those of you online, you can read it online as well, go ahead and take a look at the question. And those of you online, you don't have to respond because you're not anonymous, or you can make up an answer as to what you think somebody else would say. But those of you in the room, go ahead and just jot down your ideas, and it's okay if your ideas are different from everyone else's. That's fine. And then once you're done with it, your job is to turn it into a little ball and throw it in the box. Oh, we have pens that don't work.
I wonder
Try
what
that
you were
one.
doing over there.
Try that.
Yeah, mine started working.
Can you reach it all the way down here?
Whoa!
You
want to try again?
You can turn it into a snowball fight if you prefer
Wanna try
instead of a
again?
box.
Yeah, because then you can also, isn't this way you can have someone else open it, but you swim around a bit first?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly the point.
She threw it and then looked away. Like it didn't come from her. Oh, really?
Yeah, go ahead and crumple it up. You can throw it into the box for the other people. At the end, we want everybody to have one that isn't theirs. But we don't need them to know whose it is. In fact, we kind of prefer that they not know whose it is.
Try again anyway.
I guess I better not get any frosting on mine.
Right.
Feel the
I know who is. I'm gonna block you.
Oh, I hit the box.
Yep.
We should have, go ahead.
I've known teachers who encourage their students to actually throw them at themselves.
I think we should have an all-star weekend or something. I mean, I see you, you know, the flick of your wrist and stuff. We should have an all-star.
No, I do not.
Yeah.
At least you have a picture. At least they'll stand out and everybody will know who it is.
Everyone's gonna know who's mine anyway.
14.
I mean, someone would hold a paper airplane and then realize.
Paper airplane would be fun.
It's obsessive.
No, you're not.
Throw them at people to catch now.
And come on, Ryan, you can do it.
There's a striker here. A deadbeat.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah, throw this to Ryan here.
My aim's really bad. All right. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. No, we
But
don't do that.
you're fine, you're fine,
Heads up.
He got in his pocket.
There, I knew that one was going to get some distance.
Ryan, you are making yourself right at home.
Thank you.
Andy didn't do one.
Does everybody have one?
No, does,
We're out.
it's right here because Andy didn't do one.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so go ahead and open yours up, take a look at it quickly. Are we missing somebody else's?
Yeah, because I didn't do
Of
it.
course I got you.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
If you got your own, throw it back. Did anybody else
This is
get their own?
yours, isn't it?
I want at least 2 other people to throw theirs back and we'll trade them again because we have at least one person who got their own.
What? Well, that's
I need
gonna
at least
happen
one
every
more person to
time.
throw theirs back.
Yeah, the back was the right one.
What? Tell me this is yours then.
Okay,
No.
Sounds like yours.
is that one yours?
Wouldn't that be funny?
Okay, so,
You're going to get around.
Food fight.
Okay.
This comes from.
it's about Paul.
Oh.
Okay, so now that everybody has one,
Justin, where are you? This is yours.
we're going to open them up really quickly, and I'd like a quick show of hands. How many of you are holding a paper that votes for Jason? How many of you are holding a paper that votes for LaTanya?
What?
So we've got a couple of Tanyas in here. How many of you have a paper that votes for Maria? Couple of Marias. How many of you are holding a paper that votes for Troy? A lot of Troys. Anybody voting for Tyler? No.
He's a
Okay.
deadbeat.
So
This one also votes for Jason. I'm sorry. There's three.
there's three, so it votes for multiples. They didn't
Maria
pick just
and
one.
Troy.
Okay. All righty. So is anyone holding a paper that expresses something really interesting that you think needs to be shared? Okay.
Venus has too much frosting on it.
I think we know who said that. Okay. But the point of this is that you can get feedback from your audience safely this way. This is something that we've used a couple of times for our intern seminars during the summer, and we're going to do a little bit more of it to encourage them to ask questions midway through and at the beginning, and then again at the end, so that way if there's a topic that they're feeling a little insecure about, we're going to enable them to do that. We have other Snowball topics on a variety of subjects, so if you need to know in advance from your audience, let's say you're going to go talk to a group of 9-year-olds. If you're going to go talk to a group of 9-year-olds, and you on a particular topic, and you want a probe, one of these forms, these are called formative assessment probes, and you just want the teacher to give it to them in advance even before you get there, and that way you can look at their answers, you can see what they're thinking ahead of time. So, were there any things in the chat box that we? Nope. So that's a Snowball. So we did a combination. We did a formative assessment probe as well as a Snowball. We kind of combined them for this. But there's so many different types of assessment activities. You can poll people, fingers, or you can use lots of different ways to poll people. In fact, you can put out voting boxes. We've done this a couple of times for some of our events and had boxes that they could vote for different things. That particular one, they were just putting in entry tickets as to what they wanted, but we've used it for questions as well. Ask them to put their ticket or their whatever it is into a box based on what their choice is.
Poll everywhere, where it can be, if you want to integrate technology in your talk, poll everywhere.
So there's programs that will let you do a poll online or with their cell phones. We've tried doing it with, what's the one that we tried doing? It didn't work too well with a big lecture hall though. Flickers. Done Flickers. So there's different ways that you can poll people. We've got activities that you can use as well. So one of the activities, we're not going to do them now. I just wanted to let you see it. There's an activity where you can give them cards and ask them in advance in small groups to sort them from closest to farthest, from biggest to smallest, or to organize them into categories. These things are in the solar system, these things are in the galaxy, these things are in the universe. So depending on what you want to know about what they know at the beginning. There's some kinesthetic activities, and this one I really wanted to do. So we're gonna do it really, really quickly because we're getting low on time. This is one that I've done with teachers and students after a lesson on moon phases. So Ryan, you get to be the Earth.
All right.
Can you find, let's find one of each moon phase, but not all of them. Let's pick out 8. I need somebody to be the sun. Kenda, can I have you be the sun? Sure. And I'm gonna have you come stand over here next to the screen. And Ryan, can I have you move your chair to the middle here? And
Am I in the chair that's moving?
you're good, and yes, you're in the chair that moves. Right. This way, if the Earth needs to rotate, Ryan can spin. We just don't want her to get okay. All right. You listen to? I'll let you keep looking for those two. Okay, so I want 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I need 8 of you to come up. Everybody come up. We'll find a job for everybody. So, okay. So this is the full moon. Julie, you get to be the full moon. I will warn you guys, this is hard. I have had scientists have trouble with this. I have had lunar scientists have trouble with this. So this is not particularly easy.
Oh dear.
Okay, so Julie is the full moon. We can see where the sun is, and we can see where the earth is, and we can see where Julie is. Is she in the right spot? Yeah. She's pretty close. Somebody should have.
Very nice.
Everyone else. Okay, one other point to keep in mind is that the white spot is where the moon is bright, and the dark spot is where you can't see the moon. Sometimes people in their heads reverse it. Based on your phases, where should you be standing? This is hard. This is really, really hard.
It's easy as time.
And turn and have your plate face the earth. Have your plate face the earth, so that way everybody can see where your plate is facing.
It's like maybe
Well, whatever.
So you guys figured out that you're opposites to each other. Mm-hmm. And I am really impressed. Y'all did an awesome job.
We get extra cupcakes.
But you had to use what you know about the moon and its orbit and its phases in order to find the right location. And if you ask somebody who does not really understand moon phases to do this, they can't. They can help each other. So I like this as an assessment technique to see if after they do it, if they understand it. And then I have them trade plates, and then I have the sun move, you know, all sorts of different things switch up. So for instance, okay, everybody find somebody to trade a plate with. and give a plate to Kenda.
All right.
Give a plate. Okay. Who doesn't have a plate? Okay, somebody trade a plate with Ryan and Kenda. Each of them gets a plate. You get to be the sun. You get to be the earth. And yes, so now the sun's over here. So everybody needs to find a current spot now.
Oh, that hurts.
Like in this area, huh?
You should have 1 million by now. Close to it?
Yeah, I think this is.
So we've got the new moon, and we've got the full moon, and now do you notice a difference in the patterns here? Do you see here? The dark is on the side closest, so it's on the right. But here suddenly it's on the left. Is that correct? So somebody's wrong. Some of you are wrong. This is correct.
Okay.
No.
The light's coming from this direction.
You two are correct.
So this is on the
Everybody else is wrong. So you
Yeah,
oh, she is this time.
Wait,
You have it reversed.
You two will be the switch, and everybody else is correct.
And you're
Okay.
You are wrong.
Why? Why not?
No, she's
No, wait a minute, that's right, that's right.
Yeah, that's yeah.
I just want to say all this wrong.
So, yeah.
I forgot to reverse myself.
This is a non-trivial activity. This is a non-trivial activity. And you guys did awesome. Amazing. Give yourself a hand. So this was a kinesthetic activity that you could use as an assessment. But there's other types of kinesthetic activities. There's drawing activities and writing activities. You could ask them to, we've made things where we put down paper and invited them to write down what they were thinking or draw what they were thinking. So lots of options. Thank you all so much. You are welcome to put down the plates and head back, and we are just about done.
Woo! You did an awesome job.
You did. And yes, if I had more cupcakes, well, I do have 3 more cupcakes, and it deserves an extra cupcake. You're right.
Yes, go help yourself.
Oh, there are prizes or something.
You'll get your cupcake, girl.
They're participation trophies.
Yes.
They are participation trophies. So building a model can demonstrate understanding. Making predictions. You can ask the kids to make a prediction about what's going to happen. And if they've got a good prediction, that tells you that they had a good understanding of whatever it is you were trying to do. Now, again, none of these are things that you want to do during LPSC.
It might help. It might help some of the attendees actually.
Interpret it the wrong way.
But you could always potentially poll your audience in different ways as well. So these are some different assessment techniques we just wanted to share with you that you could use to see if you're meeting your goals, if it's for understanding or to see how engaged they are. If you wanted kids, this particular bottom picture here, what we did was we were trying to talk about science identity and science careers, and we had the kids trace themselves. This was many years ago, back when Yolanda's son was much younger, and talk about who they would be and who they were. And so activities can reveal your impact if you're talking about whether you are indeed changing their view about science careers and who they are.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're gonna hand out the, we've got a handout here, and then Paul, we're gonna be putting it online as well on the Sharing Planetary Science page. It just hasn't gotten to Ronnie yet. And it's got some of the top thoughts that we put together, but I wanted to let you think a little bit about what things we discussed today you might be interested in exploring further, learning more about, or doing, or incorporating in things you do, or things that you'd like to see us do more of in our events. I'm going to give you just 2 minutes to think, or to and then to chat, and then we've got an evaluation form. Let's see here. And then if anyone wants an example of what a probe that's different from the one that we threw around might look like, I've got one here that we created on describing the causes for moon phases. You don't have to write anything down if you don't want to. I just wanted to give you time to reflect.
Is there a copy of this NSTA book available?
Yes, in fact, we have it. I had them buy it. It was on my shelf, but I think it's in the library now.
Thank you.
I actually have this too.
Yeah.
Would you like for me to bring you a copy?
Well, the formative assessment 75 practical strategies is in the library.
Okay.
That you can check it out. Okay, let's go ahead and start sharing with each other now. You've got 2 minutes to share your ideas with each other.
What are we supposed to do? I had trouble with that. I think the one thing I wrote in terms of keeping your audience in mind is kind of planning for X amount of time, but realistically expecting.
I'm curious. I never read that.
Wanted to make sure she had something to talk to.
We might take them, but I would never.
He does now.
What do we do?
Like, for example,
Yeah.
So,
One thing that, in terms of like the kinesthetic activities, one thing that I found really good was scale models of things.
Somebody does
From
analyze
the geology department.
That's more
last year,
useful.
we did this,
I think in terms of
scaling, like time scale, where we had to take a
altering
long
the
hallway.
program itself, rather than
Like have to block it out. It has inches to know.
Yeah, but it can still benefit you.
Measure how long it's been
Yeah,
I don't think I've ever something, I think with kinesthetic activity, something that makes them gets them to experience. Like the moon phase thing was a good one, but also something where they actually have to calculate the
Oh, yeah.
that sort of depends
I
on
finally have my iRad
the student level.
just came in today, finally. I'm like, yay! iRad.
Oh, I read.
Some kind of models
Mm-hmm.
where they build something.
It gives them some investment in what they're doing. Having to do the calculation.
It's hard to record that quickly.
That was going to be my question, right? When you guys have a poll, I guess you
So you need to,
Yeah.
if you want to capture that data, yeah, that's the trick. And even then, you can do it faster.
Yes. So,
I'm just sticky, so I need. It was a good sticky.
there was a question earlier. How would you use your results? So let's say you collect information. How would you use it? What are you doing the assessments for again? See if you're meeting your goals. If you collect too much information, then you're not designing your assessment to match your goal. When we're collecting information, we do it to see how well we did what we did so that we can improve it the next time. So a lot of our evaluation data is internal, but sometimes we do include it externally. We do write it up for reports and things as well. So if you're collecting data yourself, use it for yourself and only collect the data that you're interested in. Don't collect data that you don't care about. On the other hand, if you want help with it, that's what we're here for. We're happy to. We can come along and help you design it. We can collect the data for you.
Yep.
You know, we can't tell you which people were nodding, which people weren't, but yeah. What other thoughts do you all have about what you about how you would use any of these? Which things are you most likely to use? Which things did you enjoy? Which things are you less comfortable with that, you know, just aren't really appropriate right now? What did you think?
I really liked the activity where you had us set up like our part of the solar system. I think that would be very engaging for kids. Like if I was a kid, I would really enjoy doing that. And then you learn a lot. Like I learned I didn't know the 12 phases of the moon very well, and I'm a scientist, so.
Yeah. So kinesthetic activities, you can do them as an activity with the kids, and you're engaging them. You can see that they're engaged, and in the process, you can see what they know. The one that we just did, I would not do with kids younger than teenage years. I would start with 13-year-olds at the youngest for that particular one.
Yeah. But it is very effective. It puts the kids in the place of the objects they're trying to understand.
Exactly.
I've used it once or twice to illustrate just motion of the moon around the Earth and where it is in relationship to the sun. I haven't done it in a long time, but I did do it once or twice. It was very effective.
Right. Y'all were engaged too. Y'all were really loud. I mean,
Sean.
It's okay if they're a little giggly, but that means they're enjoying it and they're engaged and they're actually going to get something.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I think there was a good deal with the first question about the tides. I think that was a good modeling of the utility of a slightly ambiguous discussion question. Because that did provoke, it gets you not only like actually talking about it, but it gets you kind of emotionally invested. There's a little bit of, I was feeling a little bit of indignation. It was just like, well, how do you expect us to answer this? And that, that brings in kind of an emotional reaction that gets them involved in it, whether they are, it makes you think about it.
I'm still heated about the I'm heated about the results. I can't wait for Christine and I to go back up to the room. We have some things to discuss upstairs.
Those think, pair, share questions, and there's a variety of them. There's a website, and you can see on the handout that I gave, it has a website where there's a variety of astronomy ones. Not a whole lot of planetary ones. I created a number of them on things that teachers here in Texas are responsible for, on things like seasons and phases and plate tectonics, and a few on the solar system, but we could always make more.
I like the formative assessment stuff because when I give talks to kids, I always worry that I've forgotten what it's like to be a kid and what they know, and then I'll end up talking on, somewhere that they're lost in. So I got to keep myself checking back to see if I'm connecting with them.
What they know and
Yeah.
where they're at and
Mhm.
what their understanding is. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it would get tedious if you use the same thing over and over again.
Sure.
If you're doing thumbs up and thumbs down, don't do it 20 times. That would be, yeah.
That's where I've seen clickers go bad because they
Use them too
they
much.
give you the incentive to just like throw 5 clicker questions into every lecture, and then they just
And yet
Don't
people
see
over clicker, and the
job.
kids don't care.
Yeah.
They just.
Oh, they hand them
really-
to their friends and say, do this for me, I'm not going to class today.
Yeah. They really just don't, they don't care. They don't pay attention.
I've never done it, but I've watched it.
Yeah, it makes it challenging to really, especially in some cases in big classrooms where you have like 200 or 300 students and those really big classrooms. I think clickers do have a purpose, but this, less than like 100 kids, smaller groups, it's useless.
Now, some of you may have seen this before. If you're doing a presentation here in the lecture hall and you want to ask a question, but you're not going to be able to see their fingers, right? Because there's 170 seats up there and it's kind of dark and that's what these were invented for. So we can hand these out and people fold them and A, B, C, or D, and they hold up the letter and the color, and you can just look out and see the colors, unless you're colorblind. In which case you can't, and we need to design something differently for you. But for them, they can see the letters, so they know which letter it is. So color blindness is less of an issue for them. It is more of an issue for you, if you are. But that way, they hold up what color they're thinking, and you get their votes without having to see fingers. We handed out our own evaluation for our own numerical, quantitative data. Thank you all so much for coming. If you have things that we can help with, let us know. And this was intended to be useful, but not a burden. This was not intended to be everybody should be doing all of these things. No. No. If you need help with anything, pick what you want to do and tell us how we can help you.
Right. Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.